nobody wants to talk about anything. So, right, exactly. And this is even like between friends, like women are not open and honest about what's really going on, what they're experiencing, the drugs that they're on, the things that they're trying. And I have found that this lack of, women really talking about it to each other and not having any conversations at all is why we're seeing so many women that end up with hormonal problems. Women that end up on the other side of PED use, looking in the mirror saying, oh my God, what the fuck did I do to myself?
Is bodybuilding about selfies, steroids, magazines, and muscles? How do I become a successful pro bodybuilder or fitness competitor? Where do I even start if I'm new? And the biggest question of all, what are the judges looking for anyway? Even today with the internet, many people first discover bodybuilding by word of mouth. The lack of regulation has caused a boom of unqualified coaches, scattered info, biased advice, dangerous protocols, and imposing trends that are a hot mess. After 20 years in the business, I have seen it all. Week after week, I'm going to talk about taboo topics that get swept under the rug, provide you tips and strategies to gain a competitive edge and stand out on stage in any division or federation. I'm going to answer all the burning industry questions without the bias. I have competed across 6 federations, earned pro status in 3, and judged in 2. I've coached posing and choreography for men and women in all federations and divisions. I know just how much competing means to you. I'm your host, Michelle Welcome, and you are listening to the Everything Else in Bodybuilding podcast. Be sure to download your free guide, 5 Things Every Bodybuilder and Fitness Competitor Needs to Know Before Your Next Show at eeinbb.com. That's www.eeinbb.com. Well, welcome back to the Everything Else in Bodybuilding podcast. My goal of this show is to talk about topics that in bodybuilding that are uncomfortable, that are biased, they get swept under the rug. And I want to educate on more than just nutrition and training. So this episode is actually part 2 of a 2-part sequence I'm doing called The Dark Side of Bodybuilding. Last episode, I talked about coaches and trainers and photographers that are perverts. And I shared some of my own stories, which was very uncomfortable for me. And I'm so excited to have a guest on today to talk about part 2 of this series of, oh man, just a topic that I think is super taboo. I'm excited to talk to you about all of this stuff. And I think it gives a lot of judgment, curiosity. It inspires misinformation. So today, what we're going to talk about is PEDs. And if you don't know what PEDs are, they are performance enhancing drugs. Not creatine, right? So not whey protein. We're talking about performance enhancing drugs, and we're going to go a deep dive, and we're going to talk about the basics, the risks, the advantages, the repercussions. There's one side of the story of the industry that is enhanced. You hear a lot about people from bikini all the way up to bodybuilding. And then there's the other spectrum, which is quote unquote natural bodybuilding, where they're not enhanced and they're actually doing surprise drug tests in airport bathrooms just to prove that you're not on any performance enhancing drugs. So I started 20 years ago in bodybuilding, and I never went the route of PEDs. I was a natural bodybuilder. So I don't have firsthand experience with PEDs. So I wanted to bring on somebody who knows what they're talking about. And I'm going to just put the disclaimer out there right now that this podcast is meant for informational purposes only, is not meant to be a substitute for medical advice or used to diagnose, prevent, treat, or cure any disease, and always consult your doctor before starting or stopping any supplements or medications. So having said all of that, I'm going to take a moment to introduce my very special guest today. I just think you are a superpower. Her name is Jamie Pinder. She's been in the industry for 10 years. I'm so excited to see you on the Olympia stage 3 times. And my favorite category personally is the physique category. And oh my goodness, if you haven't seen her pictures, go to her Instagram and just totally Instagram stalk her. She's incredible. So
Thank
Jamie,
you.
you caught my attention because you're bold, you're honest, you're straightforward. You talk about the things that people aren't talking about. And I wanted you on here because I thought you'd actually answer questions, that you're not going to be evasive or sugarcoat things. You're actually going to tell it how it is. And you're a total freaking savage. I mean,
well,
oh my
thank
God.
you.
The story that I heard of you training at the gym, you tear something, and it was a muscle or a ligament or something, like totally crazy. You go and tear something.
Yeah.
You even said it point blank that you went out in the back, smoked a bowl, came back in, and just got your training done. I was just like, all right, who is this person?
Yeah. I mean, granted, that's not a smart thing to do. So it was savage, but at the same time, it was very dumb. So, one thing I have to say is, like, the reason I'm so open about talking about women in PEDs is because of my own journey and the things that I have gone through competing. And I know for myself, like, it was very hard as I was competing to find really good, useful information about women in PEDs. It just really wasn't out there. And, even having girlfriends that competed and people that, like, other women in my life that were in this sport, and everyone's closed-lipped. Nobody wants to talk about anything. So, right, exactly. And this is even like between friends, like, women are not open and honest about what's really going on, what they're experiencing, the drugs that they're on, the things that they're trying. And I have found that this lack of, women really talking about it to each other and not having any conversations at all is why we're seeing so many women that end up with hormonal problems. Women that end up on the other side of PED use, looking in the mirror saying, oh my God, what the fuck did I do to myself? And I started to notice that in the sport, especially when it came to women at the high level, especially when we're looking at the divisions that are a little bit more aggressive, like the female bodybuilding, women's physique, figure, you see these women who are competing and they were like competing at a high level for years. And then all of a sudden they would just disappear. They're just gone. And it's just like, what happened to them? And then come to find out that a lot of these women, they disappeared because the PED use led to hormonal issues. And now they're in a spot where they're depressed, where they can't even get in shape, never mind compete. They can't even lose enough body fat to feel comfortable in a bikini again. So
competing is, and Jamie, just to hear you say that, competing itself, regardless of you're enhanced or not, is hard. It's hard work. I've seen people come and go in this industry just from hardcore dieting, stupid dieting. I mean, and there's so much crazy bro science out there from just a nutrition and training standpoint. I can only imagine adding enhancement in there for example, like, do you remember ephedra? I don't know.
I do, yes.
Okay, so ephedra at one point was legal. And that was like an amazing product. And I remember coming off a show and I just didn't know any better. So I just went cold turkey off of ephedra. And I couldn't get out of bed for like 2 days. This was ephedra. So I can't imagine what happens when you're coming off of these things. And I'd love to kind of talk about what exactly are these things. So, there's performance enhancing drugs and most people like steroids. Everything is steroids. Okay, is it? There's steroids. Is there other things besides steroids? What are steroids? So can you share some of the specifics of what exactly people are using to dial in for a show?
So, now there's actually, back in like the beginning of bodybuilding in the 80s and the 90s, it was more basic where people were basically using anabolics. Back then, I guess some people were also using things like growth hormone. But there wasn't as much as there is now. And now there's also this. Well, so now we have the internet, right? Where back in the 80s and the 90s, if you were to get bodybuilding drugs, if you say you were a woman that competed and, say you want to do Anavar, well, you would have to know some guy at the gym or like you had to know someone in order to get the drugs, right? So it wasn't easily accessible. Where now, you have new compounds that are being created. So you've got pro hormones, you have SARMs, you still have anabolics and all of these things, and you have the peptides, you have anti-estrogens, fat burners, you have thyroid medications. So you've got all of these different compounds, and now you have the availability of them.
Because do you really need all of that? Do you really need all of that?
Here's the thing. You can compete. You can compete and not use anything. And I have plenty of competitors that I prep, and they are completely 100% natural. They compete in natural organizations. And they do well, and they love what they're doing, and they get great results. They love the way that they look. It really depends on what federation you are going to compete in, where you're going with the sport, what your goals are, and what you are willing to risk in your health, in your longevity, in your femininity. All of these things you need to take in consideration if you're actually going to use PEDs.
And I can't wait to deep dive into those specifics in a little bit. So when you were talking about enhancements, so there are the natural organizations, and they're very, very particular. So it's interesting though, because
I will tell you what, what's really funny is I do a course for women about PEDs and anabolics. I call it my ABC primer to PEDs. And you wouldn't believe how many WBFF girls have taken my course. So
WBFF doesn't drug test. They don't drug test.
They're supposedly a natural organization.
No.
So, it's like, you've also got to be careful. Yeah, WBFF is, those girls are all using stuff. It's not a natural organization.
So I competed as a pro in the figure category in the WBFF.
It's a shame though, because I feel like, here's the thing. I am not pro anabolics. I'm not anti or like PEDs. I'm not pro PEDs. I'm not anti PEDs. I am know everything you possibly can so you can make an informed decision for yourself and what is good for you, your health, your lifestyle, everything. But I'm not pro or anti, but what I am anti is, if you're going to compete in a natural organization or an organization that the rules are you can't use PEDs, then don't fucking use PEDs. Sorry, excuse me. Don't
please.
use PEDs.
Girl, I am with you on that. I don't care what people do.
Compete in an organization where
there's a place for there's a place for everyone. But yes, if you're in, and the thing is, even the natural organizations have time frames. So I think, on average, I'll say 7 years, for example. You have to have not been using something for 7 years. But we're going to talk about the changes and how some of these things are permanent. So even you could be natural, but some people use that as as a loose term now. I'm hearing people say when they're off their PEDs, they're calling themselves all natty. And it's interesting to see this evolution that's going on right now. But yeah, the natural federations do drug test, urine tests. They do the spot testing, like I mentioned in the beginning of the show. Mm-hmm. But the non-drug tested federations are the ones that are huge. And they have a tremendous amount of notoriety. So do you think that affects people's willingness to maybe compromise things that they might not have because of the notoriety that goes along with larger federations? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that if you are going to compete in one of those bigger federations that allow drugs, you are going to, be kind of like edged a little bit more to actually use. But it also, what you should do is more take in consideration, what is your ultimate goal with the sport? What are you really getting out of competing? Because there's a huge difference between a woman who is like myself, that I knew when I started competing that competing was going to be part of my career. I knew that competing was going to help my coaching business. I also knew that I wanted to compete at the Olympia level, and that was genetically an option for me, that I was genetically blessed that I was actually able to make it to the Olympia. So, with all of those things, I'm going to take a little bit more risk. I also don't want children. So my fertility is not an issue for me as well. So, for me, taking more risk and using PEDs was reasonable for the goals that I have and where I was going with the sport. But there's a huge difference between me and maybe the mom who is doing, like, her kids finally, she's got empty nest now. So now she can finally do something for herself. She's been working out for 20 years. Now she finally is going to do that show. She's going to do women's physique because she's more muscular. She's been training for 20 years. And, now she wants to do it as a bucket list because now she can finally put the time into doing what she's wanted to do. Am I going to give the same cycle to her as I'm going to take? No.
Is there is there some sort of staples that are part of cycles? Like,
no, I mean,
anabolics,
the way
cutting agents, diuretics.
For myself, like the way that I coach my clients is not necessarily the way that everyone else does and the way that it should be. Like, I don't think everyone's doing it the right way, is what I'm trying to say. Is that the way that I see that you should go about going into anabolics and what you should use and what you shouldn't use is, again, based on the individual. What is their specific goal? What is their actual potential? What is where are they going with it? Because again, for someone like myself using PEDs, that risk can be high and that but I'm okay with that. But for that mom who's doing it as a bucket list, well, honestly, if you've never competed before, try competing without the drugs first. And then
see is that not promoted, Jamie? Aren't you? I feel like it's like the first. Well, you do, which is why you're here, because you are honest and you actually do genuinely care about people, especially you've got this movement about saving women's femininity. So and I have a lot of respect for that. But I do feel I remember having a conversation with a friend. She competed on the Olympia stage in the physique category herself, and I remember she went to a workshop and somebody at the workshop said to her, "So what are you doing?" And she was like, "What do you mean?" At that time, she wasn't, using anything. And I don't believe she has at all. And she says that the person, his automatic response to her was, "Oh, well, you're not going to be ready." Just like that. "Oh, well, you're not. Oh, well, you're not going to be ready then."
Wow.
So do you feel like there's some encouragement that's going on that is perhaps maybe continuing this direction of more and more and more of PEDs?
I do feel like there are some coaches who are like that. And I wish it wasn't so. I actually was just on a prospect call with someone just last week. And she's like, "Oh my God, I'm so happy to talk to someone like you," because the last girl that she was interviewing another female coach before me. And this is a female coach. And this female coach was, these are all the drugs you're going to be doing. And if you're going to do drugs, then fuck it. You might as well get all the sides and just go all in. And you're going to be on anabolics all year round. And it's the complete opposite of the way that I think that women should, or really anyone should go about using PEDs, especially if you want to be around for a long time. I mean, and now we've got to really think about what's going on in the world of bodybuilding right now. We're seeing all of these very young athletes, in their 40s, early 50s, who are dying in their sleep overnight. So it's like, you can't take these things lightly, and you've got to make sure that you are with a coach that if you say that you're not comfortable doing something, that they respect that. And they can either explain to you why they want you to do something that, they're suggesting. But you've got to have, if you don't have good communication with your coach and you're telling your coach that you don't want to do something or that these are my limitations, or better yet, if your coach isn't even asking you what your limitations are for your femininity, for what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do, then you probably should find a new coach, because those are very baseline questions for a coach. If I'm going to be giving someone a PED protocol, I need to know, what is your idea of what femininity is? Because that's
Jamie, what percentage of coaches do you think are, I hate to say the word bully, but I'm going to use that as an example. I talked about it, episode 2 of my podcast. It's called the death of credibility. I'm personally mind blown with how many people are out there like they know what they're talking about, and they have no credibility. I don't even know if they know human physiology to begin with, but
Yeah, right.
you put coach up there next to their name on, social media, and put throughout a bunch of pictures of fancy clients with trophies, and next thing you know, they're the person to coach with. But I'm seeing a lot of, I'm going to say the word bully because I don't have another word for it, where it's like, you should be grateful to work with me type of attitude.
Hmm.
And I think that there's that intimidation that goes along with it. And again, PED or not. So I can
Right.
only imagine what's going on with women who want to win. And I don't know, what is it with the bullying and women getting
That
blindsided and just following along with it?
you know what? I don't coach like that at all. So when I hear these stories of these women who are being bullied, it really it appalls me that a coach would actually do that to someone. Because that's not my coaching method at all.
Right.
So that whole bullying is like, I don't understand it at all. And, why women tolerate it is really a question they need to ask themselves. Why don't you feel like you have agency to listen? Like, competing's freaking hard. You are
Yeah.
sacrificing time, money. If you are using PEDs, maybe your femininity, your health, all these other things. So if you're going to compromise and put all of that into a prep, but you're with a coach where you feel like you have no agency and you can't like openly communicate with them, well, I'm sorry, sister, but that's on you. Like,
Yeah.
some, competitors also have to take responsibility for themselves. If you have a coach that's bullying you, well, guess what you need to do? Put on your big girl pants and stand up for yourself and say, hey, listen, I don't like the way you're talking to me. This is not a good coaching relationship. And you know what? I'm not going to pay you anymore. I'm going to go find someone else who does want to communicate with me. And that is going to take the way that I feel into consideration, because this is my body. This is my journey. I'm putting so much into this. I'm not going to let some fucking asshole tell me what I can and cannot do. So
It
it's
happens
like,
all the time. I think a lot of this is also
well,
bodybuilding is word of mouth,
what I think
right?
doesn't happen enough is I think women, like, they're okay with this victim mentality of, oh, poor me. I had this coach that made me do this. And I had this coach that was a bully to me. Girl, like, you're the one fucking paying him. Like, don't be his client anymore. So it's like, I wish that, like, what I really would like to see is for women to have some more agency of their own and to stand up for themselves. Because
So how can they do
listen,
that? Because this is a word of mouth sport. So there isn't a lot of really credible people out there. There
right,
isn't. And of such a, I mean, you are, which is why, again, you're here today, but there isn't. So when people are getting introduced to the sport, it's usually by a friend or somebody at the
right,
gym or a coach or a trainer. And a trainer who's all of a sudden never coached anyone for a competition before is all of a sudden telling you to have 800 calories and do 2 hours of
right,
cardio and get to your show. And you think, oh, well, that's bodybuilding because everybody's got the woe is me.
right.
Bodybuilding's hard, I'm going to be starving and, and all of this. And people really get onto that like pity party. So without there being a lot of coaches that are credible, a lot of people just, I don't know if they know the difference that there is that option to get out there. What do you think?
I think that like, I know for myself as a coach, I don't let anyone sign on with me until I've had a call with them. They need to talk to me. So it's like, depending on your level of what kind of coaching you want, do you want a coach where you can just go to their website, click, and all of a sudden you're their client and they're not going to ask you any questions and you've got a plan in 5 minutes?
Yeah,
Is that
the
what you
same.
like? That's not very custom, right? Like, that's not going to, they're not taking anything about you into consideration. I
And word on
actually
the street
signed
is the
on with
plan is the same as somebody else's.
well, what's crazy to me is I actually signed on with I was trying to just like get ready for a photo shoot this summer. And I was like, you know what? Let me just hire a coach just so I don't want to think about it. Like, I'm one of those people where I'm way better off with a coach because I don't like, I do everyone else's plans and I'm doing everyone else's stuff all day long. I don't want to have to deal with mine. Could I do it? Sure. But I just like it better when I have someone else doing it. So I hired a coach that I had known of for years, not a huge name, but like a moderate name coach. And like, I have known other athletes that have worked with him. They've had great experiences. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to give him a shot for this like short little, like, cut I'm going to do. And I sign on with him and he doesn't ask me for blood work. He doesn't ask me what I'm okay with using, what I'm not okay with using, how much I'm eating at that time, how much no information at all. And I got a plan in like an hour.
Seriously?
And it had a drug protocol, diet, cardio, like everything. And it's like,
so what'd you think of the drug protocol?
it was, that's the thing is like,
was
the
it
drug
terrible?
protocol was more, it wasn't terrible. So I've seen much worse, but it was beyond what I was comfortable with at the time. You know,
really?
I'm getting ready for a photo shoot. I don't need to put myself at risk to do a photo shoot, right? You know, it's like, you know, there was no customization. There was no, you know, consideration of what I'm comfortable with or what I'm not comfortable with, right? So I think when you're signing on with a coach, are you getting a call with that coach? When you have the call with the coach, do you feel like they're listening to you? Do you feel like this is a coach that is going to take in consideration all of your concerns? Are they willing to educate you about the things you don't understand? You've got to ask these questions. So it's like going into the world of bodybuilding, you've got to do your research. And if sometimes your research means that you're getting on a call with that coach. If they're not willing to get on a call with you, well, do you really want a coach that isn't willing to do that?
Well, what about the protocol that you were given?
Questions.
Yeah, and the protocol that you were given, it sounds like it was generic. So again, trying to educate the people that are laymen who don't know what these protocols are. What is a common anabolic? What is a common this, that, and the other thing? What are common PEDs that would show up on a plan like the one you got?
So on that plan specifically was Anavar, which is an anabolic. So the anabolics were Anavar and primobolan. And then there was anti-estrogen was Nolvadex, and which like I didn't even want to have to use Nolvadex. Like I just wanted to, you know, not even have to go there with that. And then I believe that he had Clen on there as well, which that's, you know, for a cut, that's pretty generic and normal.
And what does Clen do? Like, what do they each do? What's the purpose of them?
So the anabolics, so that's the Anavar and the primobolan, those are going to be the things that are going to help you build and retain muscle. So they're helping you recover faster from training. And it's also allowing you to retain the muscle that you have while in a calorie deficit. Those compounds, you know, something like Anavar and primobolan, those are both compounds that are commonly used for women in a cutting phase, because the Anavar is going to give you like an artificial hardness to your muscle. And the like primobolan is going to give you like a 3D kind of like pop look to your muscle. So they do kind of not only help you retain that muscle and help you recover faster from your training, but it's also going to give your muscle a certain look that you can't get as a natural athlete. And so, you know, you've got that like added bonus to that. And then, you know, Nolvadex is a SERM. So it's a selective estrogen receptor modulator. So if you think about estrogen in a woman's body, and the reason why we're using something like Nolvadex is because when you're trying to diet down and you're a woman, that like your estrogen related fat stores are like your butt and your thighs, your hips, and taking something like Nolvadex can help reduce that estrogen related fat stores. And that does that by taking the, like, you know, you've got all of your estrogen hormones that are kind of like floating around in your body, right? And you have all of these receptors that the estrogen is binding to in different sites all over your body, right? So what the Nolvadex is doing is it is it's binding to those receptors so that the estrogen does not bind to those receptors. So you still have all your estrogen is still floating around and your estrogen is still being produced in your body. It's just that it's not being bound in those receptor sites anymore because the Nolvadex is doing that for you. And so that allows you to, you know, lose a little bit more of that body fat from those estrogen related fat stores. So that's what the Nolvadex is doing. Usually you'll see that at the last, you know, unfortunately, in some cycles, I'm seeing it like for an entire prep, but it really should be like the last like 8 to 10 weeks of a prep.
Does your estrogen go to 0 when you take something like Novadex?
No, because again, your estrogen is still going to be floating around in your body. You're still going to be producing estrogen. So your estrogen's not going to go to 0. You just aren't going to be like the estrogen, you're going to have a lot more free estrogen. You're not going to have as much bound estrogen in your body.
Okay. And then the last one was clenbuterol.
The clenbuterol.
What does that do?
So that is going to help you burn more fat. So that's more of a fat burner. It's got a little bit of an anabolic component to it, but it's mostly just for fat burning. So that's going to help boost your metabolism so you can actually burn more fat. And it's actually was in medical uses a bronchodilator. So they use it for people with asthma. It opens up your airways. But it will make it so that you can burn fat more efficiently. And
now, all three at once, everything at once.
All three at once. Yep.
And how does that affect your psychology? Does it?
It definitely does. And I say this to women all the time: is figure out what you're okay with compromising before you start anabolics. Because when you start anabolics, because here's the thing. Before you start, you might, I see women who might say, all right, well, I don't want my voice to change, right? And then all of a sudden they start a cycle, like a mild cycle, right? And then all of a sudden I call them the contest prep blinders come on. And that's really the androgens affecting your brain chemistry. It's going to affect the decisions you make. It's going to affect the way that you think about things, the way that you feel about things, your drive, your motivation. It's going to improve drive and motivation, but it may also, what I see a lot of is once the women get on the anabolics, all of a sudden it's, oh my God, I will do anything it takes to win. I will do anything it takes to win. And that's where you see them, oh, well, now I'm just going to take more, or now I'm going to take this, or you have the coach that says, all right, well, things aren't looking the way I want it to look. Why don't we add this in? And they have those contest prep blinders on, and they're like, yes, I'll do it. And then their voice changes. And then after the show, when they get off that high school auditorium stage, they did not win the plastic trophy. And now they get off the stage and their voices change, and maybe even some of their facial features have changed.
Do they hear it and see it? I have to ask, because I see girls that are 20 years old on social media, and they're posting.
I don't know. You've got to ask them.
They look nothing like before. Do they not hear it or see it? Is it the prep goggles?
I think that most women can hear it when they hear their own recording on, say if they make a YouTube video or an Instagram. I think they can hear it there, but I don't think as it's happening, it's not easy. It's not super easy to recognize, except for, when I'm coaching women and voice is a concern, then I ask them when they're starting, do you notice any cracking in your voice? Because the first thing that's going to happen is when you laugh or when you sing, your voice is going to start cracking before it actually starts to change, the octaves.
And why is that?
Down. Why is that? That's how it first starts. I don't know the exact mechanism behind that.
Interesting.
But that's where it'll first start, is you'll start to get a cracking when you sing or when you laugh. And if your voice is your concern at that point, if you get that cracking, then you need to stop taking the anabolics, because otherwise you might end up with that side effect forever.
Now, do people get that? I mean, side effect for the voice, for example, is that everyone, or are there people that actually don't have that issue?
It's not everyone. Some people can take anabolics and not have their voice change.
Nothing. What are the side effects?
Here's the thing. There's only so much you can do without having that side effect as a woman. You can probably get away with using very small, mild doses of very mild compounds for short periods of time. But once you start stacking compounds, using compounds for long periods of time, there's going to be no avoiding it. So it's really going to depend on how you design all of your cycles, how long you're running it for, how much time you're taking off in between cycles. I think that's one thing that a lot of women forget too, is your time off is just as important as your time on, because you cannot stay on these compounds year round. It is not healthy for you. It is not good for you. And it'll eventually catch up with you. And
Are
that's
there
where we
any
see
health benefits at all, or is it
of
strictly to
staying on
win?
all year round. No.
No, just the compounds themselves. Are there any health benefits at all, or is it strictly to achieve a physique that will get on an Olympia stage or a pro stage or anything, whatever the goal is?
I mean, I suppose if you think of a benefit of like being more muscular is a benefit, right? Because you've got more skeletal muscle mean your metabolism is going to run faster. You're going to be able to eat more food. So
Mm.
in that aspect, yes. But is it like good for any of your internal organs or your heart or anything? Like, no, it's detrimental to all of those things, especially when you're using them for long periods of time and not taking the breaks and not properly PCTing the way that you should.
Now, what about the men? How do the men get into it? And their cycles and what their protocols are. Are they very different than what the women go through and encounter?
So they should be very different.
Okay,
Are they always very different? No.
why not?
So the problem is that the way that men respond to anabolics is very different from the way that women respond to anabolics. And what we see, like one of the biggest things that I see all the time is you've got some gym bro who competes, and all of a sudden he starts dating this girl who, she starts going to the gym, and he's like, oh, just take what I'm taking. And she ends up taking testosterone and tren and all these other compounds that women really should not be doing, especially if you care about your femininity or your health or your fertility.
So there are known compounds that women should absolutely not touch that are
Yes,
okay for men.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. And okay for men, it depends on, again, like what is that man's goal? Is it to compete or is it just to look good on the beach? It depends. I'm not going to give a guy who just wants to look beach ready, the same cycle as I'm going to give a pro bodybuilder. Two totally different people with two totally different needs, right? The guy who's going on the beach, I might just give him TRT, like testosterone replacement therapy. I don't know, maybe a little bit of Anavar if he wants to harden up a little bit. And then for my pro bodybuilder, well, we might have him on 3, 4, 5, 6 different compounds, depending
Wow.
on what level he's at and what comfort level, what his blood work looked like. What's his comfort level of what he's willing to use? What things have he used in the past that work really well for him? But I think the important thing is that for women to recognize that a man, like if you are trying to do the same cycle that a dude is doing, you are going to end up a dude. Like your blood work is going to look like a man's blood work.
Like a
So
chemical sex change, you mean? Like
yes, that's what I like to
literally.
call it, the chemical
Yeah.
sex change. So it's like you've got to be really careful. You can't run the same things your boyfriend or your husband runs.
How
For
does it
women,
affect relationships? So
ooh,
just
that's a
so
good
going
one.
into so the relationships from talking from a male's perspective to his spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend, and vice versa for women.
I mean,
And how about you too?
I
If you want to
can't
share.
speak on like male, like, a partner that, and I think it really depends on the couple too. I know for myself, like when I was married, that's when I first started using anabolics. And my husband at the time, he actually like made me write down like the things I was okay with, the things I wasn't okay with, why I wanted to use. He like made me do a lot of research. I had to like he made me go through a lot of like jump through a lot of hoops and stuff to make sure I was making the right choice for myself because he
Wow.
knew a lot more about it than I did. And he
Mm.
didn't want to feel like he was pushing me to do it. Right. So I know in my relation, like in that relationship, my husband was very supportive. And when I started using, he was very supportive and he was, kind of like less is more. Let's like see what we can do with the least amount of stuff that we can give you. And luckily, I was like a super responder. So I respond to like really well to not a lot of stuff. But then as I started getting further and further in my competition, career, and I started doing better and better, we had a lot of other like marriage issues, but he would say that when I was in prep and when I was on the anabolics, I was not as like soft, like, and not physically soft, but like emotionally soft. I wasn't as, so like when we think
So
about
cold.
how, yeah, like when you think about what the, like a traditional mother is, right? Very nurturing, caring, very empathetic, you know? So think about this. All like there's a hormonal component to that. Women were designed to have more estrogen, and part of you having higher levels of estrogen makes you so that you are more mothering and nurturing. And that's important for the evolution of humans because women need to be rearers of children and small children. So we need to have that and we need to have that extra estrogen. But, and then when we think of like traditionally, what, like if we think of the traditional male, he is the provider, protector, aggression, right? Like traditional male, like things that you kind of are like driven and all these other things that you're thinking of traditional male attributes. There's a reason behind that. More testosterone is going to create more of that. And again, for the evolution of humankind to keep on, like to survive, we needed to have mothers that were nurturing and men who were protectors to protect those women nurturing those babies.
So that changes
then,
when you go off?
Well, listen. So listen. So, well, then you take a woman and you cut back her estrogen by giving her estrogen blockers. You increase her testosterone. And what are you going to get? You're going to get less nurturing, less of that soft, and more of that driven, hard, cold, you know, when you're on a cycle. So, you know, is it going to change who you are completely as a person? No. And, you know, one thing that I would say often, especially to like male bodybuilders, was, you know, if you are not an asshole, then anabolics aren't going to make you, they're not going to make you like a complete fucking asshole. But if
Jamie's
you're already
threshold,
kind
are
of,
you an asshole?
well, that's the thing is like, if you're kind of a jerk, then
You're going to
adding
be
the
a major
anabolics
jerk.
is just going to amplify your jerkiness.
Oh,
And like
that's too
my
funny.
ex-husband is a great example of this because, and he's a much different person now, so like I can talk about him like this. But and so he's completely changed now. If anyone knows him now, and like he's single, ladies, he's a great guy, good catch. But back in the day, before all of that, he was a jerk, right? He was like kind of an asshole even before the anabolics. And then you add the anabolics on top of that. Whoo, he was a major jerk. So it's like, it's just going to amplify what you already are. Right. But so, yeah, it will change, you know, kind of like it can change your dynamic in your relationship. If you are more of the nurturer in your relationship and all of a sudden some of that is kind of like pulled back because of what you're doing chemically in your body, yeah, that can have an effect. Now, does it have to? And does it have to be detrimental to your relationship? No. You know, that's also a result of good communication, good partnership, being able to be open with your partner about, you know, how each other is feeling and what's going on in your body and how you're acting towards them.
You know, I feel that, and that's really helpful because to hear that you just say there has to be the communication. I think whether you're on PEDs or not, I think people need to communicate more
Oh,
personally.
hell yeah.
You know, but here's the thing with PEDs. Aren't they illegal?
Well, some of them are.
Or is it prescription?
So, okay, so some of them are illegal. Some of them are gray area. So when we're talking about PEDs, we're now also talking about peptides and SARMs. And peptides and SARMs, and I love the people who say that they're natty and yet they're using SARMs. And it's like,
Okay,
no,
what is
you're
a
not
SARM
natty.
and what is a peptide?
So a
Back up real
SARM
quick.
is a selective androgen receptor modulator. So essentially what they tried to do with SARMs when they created SARMs was they tried to only have like the anabolics, but like they were like taking the anabolic, but only having it recepted or binding in certain receptor sites. So it's a selective androgen receptor modulator. So you're selectively going to be letting these androgens bind to androgen receptors, but only in certain places. So they're designed to only be being bound to the receptors in your muscle sites. But unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way. People think they can use SARMs and not get side effects and not get virilization and not like affect their internal organs. But
that's how it's sold.
What I'm seeing is that the blood work from women who use SARMs are usually worse than women who use anabolics because
what about their blood work?
So their liver enzymes are elevated, their hormones are jacked up in some way, their kidney values do not look good, their blood lipids are off. So, and these are things that we see with anabolics as well. Same thing will happen. Only I'm seeing it worse with the SARMs because generally, when you are taking an anabolic, you know what it's going to do to your body, right? You know it's going to affect kidneys. You know it's going to affect heart. You know it's going to affect liver. So what do? You take preventative over-the-counter supplementation in order to kind of combat that while you're on cycle. But because you have all these women who think that SARMs are magic and you don't have any side effects, they aren't taking any preventative care when they're taking the SARMs. And so I see the blood work from women who take SARMs, and it's usually always worse than the women who are on anabolics. And another thing that I don't care, why I don't like SARMs is with SARMs, like if you order SARMs from somewhere, I can't test and see if that Austrian is Austrian. But if I buy Anavar from an underground lab, I can get a testing kit and I can test that Anavar and see if it's really Anavar. So
you can actually get a testing kit from somewhere? Or is that another purchase online?
Roidtest.com.
Okay. Interesting. And then peptides. What are peptides used for?
So peptides are like long chain amino acids, and it's almost like a growth hormone, right? Where it's using those peptides in order to get certain muscle growth or to accelerate fat burning. So peptides, generally, you're going to be injecting peptides. And there's all different types of peptides. There are peptides that are geared more towards, repairing muscle injuries. So you've got things like TB500, BCP 157. So those are like, they call them like the Wolverine peptides because they help rebuild soft tissue and collagen, and they can help with injuries. And actually, like I use both of those after all of my surgeries, and they helped me recover from surgery faster. So
why are those banned? Those sound like they're beneficial health-wise.
That you'd have to ask the federations. I don't know. I don't know.
Are there side effects to that? Like, what's the bad thing? The bad thing is your soft tissue is going to get better.
Yeah. So for the TB and the BCP 157, those are generally like they're very safe. No real side effects that you need to worry about. And a lot like a huge use of that in there's a lot of actual like studies of medical studies using these peptides in order to, repair labrums, repair torn muscles. So if you have an injury, using something like the TB 500 or the BCP 157 can really accelerate your healing. But then there's also things like FRAG that helps with more fat burning. You've got the IGF and DES or IGF LR3 and DES, and those work much like insulin and like growth hormone. So they're going to help build more muscle, burn more body fat at the same time. The DES is something that I like to use a lot, especially with my women who want to bring up specific body parts, but don't want to use anything hormonal. So they don't want any like possibility of virilization. And those are, the peptides are really great for women who want to use something, but they don't want to use anything that's going to compromise their femininity.
It sounds a lot of variety, because you mentioned on one end, you talked about soft tissue repair for healing, especially after surgery. And then over on an opposite spectrum, you talked about fat burning. So I can see, so I can see how that, if you're thinking of natural organizations and how they're trying to take away any sort of unnatural competitive edge, I guess I'm just speaking, what I think is what their reasoning behind it. So having said that, I can see how the ones over here, but the ones for soft tissue, it's just interesting to me. Like that doesn't sound like a bad thing. And I would think that if you're on anabolics and you're growing, do you feel that you're growing past your genetic potential? So if you're doing that, your soft tissue, is being affected by that. So are you past your genetic potential when you're taking anabolics? And is it affecting your
I
soft
mean,
tissue?
I suppose I suppose you are, more than your genetic, because genetically, if you didn't have the anabolics, you wouldn't be growing the size that you're growing. It also depends on, are you someone who you've worked out in the gym for 1 year and then you started anabolics?
Mm,
Because at that point, you haven't even tapped out your natural potential yet.
mm.
So are the anabolics really helping you go beyond your genetic potential? No, because you probably didn't even hit your natural potential yet.
What do
So
you
they're
what do you think is going to happen to somebody like that who hasn't even hit their genetic potential and they're taking all these anabolics? Is that almost stunting what they could potentially do, or you think it's just expediting their progress?
No, I don't think it's stunting. It's definitely not stunting what they can actually do, but you're putting yourself at more risk before you need to. It's like I always encourage women, like, you've got, like, tap out that natural potential first. See what you can do without the drugs, because you might not even need them if you're doing the right thing. So, the thing that I see a lot with women, especially like bikini competitors, is they will diet all year long. They will do tons of cardio all the time. They will barely eat anything all year round, but they want to run anabolics so that they can gain more muscle. Well, it's like, well, sweetheart, back off the cardio, eat some fucking food, and guess what? You're probably going to grow.
Eat
So
some
it's like,
fucking food.
right? Like, like, stop dieting
Oh,
year
you're too
round.
funny.
Stop competing. Like, stop doing 12 shows in a year.
Oh my god,
You might
the
actually
cardio's
be
got to
able to
stop.
grow,
Yeah, the
right?
cardio's got to
So
stop.
it's like, we only want to, like, here's the thing: anabolics and PEDs, they need to be supplemental to an already good plan, to an already good cardio program, diet program, training program. They're not going to do the work for you. So it's like, you want these things to be supplemental to what you're already doing. So that means you've got to make sure you're already doing everything you should be doing, because when you add the anabolics in, if okay, so say we're the bikini competitor that's been dieting for 12 months out of the year. We're doing an hour and a half of cardio every single day all year round. And then we're like, well, I'm going to start doing Anavar in order to build some muscle. Well, guess what? That, like, even adding that Anavar in, what kind of results she's going to get? Not very, like, she's not going to get great results. But you take that same bikini competitor and you get her off of the cardio, you start feeding her, get her on a good progressive training program, and then she starts growing. And then you wait until she plateaus and then she's not growing anymore. And then you say, okay, you've been growing for the last 2 years. Now it's time, if you want to start something, we can add in some anabolics. And bam, she's going to get a tremendous result from adding that Anavar in. But you take that same girl in a different circumstance, and guess what? She's not going to get very good results from that
But will she
Anavar.
get
Will
the
she get
side effects
results?
though?
She'll get the side
So
effects. It
she'll
depends.
get
Depends
she
on
gets
how
the results, but not the ones she wants
well, it
necessarily,
depends.
right?
It also depends on, how much is she using.
Mm.
There are some women who can use Anavar in low doses for short periods of time, and they don't experience any side effects at all. Now, granted,
Is
like,
that why it's a
there's still.
go-to? Like, again, I don't have the experience with PEDs personally, but when you hear, and I've been in the industry for 20 years, so I talk and I hear and I have a lot of friends and blah, 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 blah. My point is that Anavar seems to be the one that is loosely spoken. Like, everyone's like, it's like the
Mhm.
go-to for women, but it is an anabolic, correct?
Yes, it
So
is an anabolic.
why is it the go-to one? Because isn't it still going to give sides potentially?
It still has to, like, there are some women who, okay, so one thing to understand is that every woman's going to respond differently. Every woman's going to respond differently. There is no like cut and dry, like, when you take Anavar, these are your sides. When you're at this dose, it doesn't work that way. Everyone's going to be different. I can give you 5 milligrams of Anavar, and your hair might start falling out, your voice might change in the first week. Like, it might be disastrous for you. Where I can take 5 milligrams of Anavar and I'm like, I don't really, I'm a little bit stronger this week, maybe. Like, nothing else. No, like, my hair's fine, my voice fine, like, nothing changes. So it really is going to depend on the woman and how she reacts to it.
So
So,
what are the side effects? So if it's nothing blankets, and it's different for
mhm,
everyone, virilization, you mentioned that
yes.
earlier. So can we talk a little bit more about side effects? Are you comfortable
Yeah,
explaining what women
absolutely.
are potentially, what could potentially happen to them?
Yeah. So when let's talk about virilization first. So virilization is the male attributes that women will get when they're using anabolics. So you have things like, and these are the things that you can see, right? These are generally not the things that we're going to see in blood work. These are the things that you're going to physically notice, like on your body. So hair loss from your head, hair growth on your face, chin, chest hair, like everywhere, really. Like you're just going to grow more hair.
Mm.
I know for myself, like I have to shave under my chin every single day. I've gotten my upper lip lasered probably like dozens of times. And, I've got like hair that grows on my chest still. So it's like, you'll have that. You'll have like hair will shed or like you'll get that receding hairline. Voice changes. So your voice will drop. Also like clitoral enlargement, clitoral sensitivity. So you'll actually get enlargement of like that organ. And again, like that's something that some women don't mind at all. That's like I know for myself, like it actually made my sex life a lot better. I actually orgasm way more than I used to. So for me, it's actually an added plus. It's not something that I see as a negative.
Mm.
And but what I do see is that with especially younger women, I see women in their early 20s who they have a boyfriend, right? And he's a bodybuilder and he convinces her to do an aggressive cycle. She becomes virilized, her voice drops, her clit gets enlarged, and it stays there permanently. Like it doesn't go down
I
after.
was going to ask you
And
that. What about the hair receding?
and maybe like, yeah, hair receding, that may or may not. And here's the thing, all of these virilization sides, they may possibly be permanent forever. Things like hair loss that usually will kind of subside when you come off of the anabolics. Now if you're like receding, like if your hairline starts to recede though, probably won't come back. Will it stop falling out like it was when you're on anabolics? Yes, once you come off cycle, it usually will slow down. Like that shedding will slow down. But the facial hair growth and stuff, once you start growing hair there, when you come off cycle, it might not be growing as fast and as thick as when you were on cycle. But like if you want to get rid of that, you're gonna have to like get that lasered. And then when you use again, it's going to grow back.
What about
So
men? What about
what
their
about?
side effects?
Well, here's the thing. Like virilization is only for women. You know
Right.
why? Because when a man gets more manly, that's just him being a man, right? Like men aren't going to get virilized because they are men. So they're just getting more manly. And that's not counter to their sex,
What about
right?
the breast tissue though on the men? Doesn't that
So
grow?
no. Well, for men, breast you can get gynomast. You can get gyno from using like if a man uses too many anabolics and their androgens get too high, it's going to aromatize into estrogen, and then that's why and there's prolactin is also part of that too. And that's going to make a guy have that gyno, but women that's not going to happen to. And generally, will women, if they use a certain level of anabolics, you're going to start like, yes, you will start aromatizing more. You will create more estrogen, but you don't really see that women's like breasts are getting bigger when they're taking too many androgens. It's more like when a woman's taking too many androgens and it starts to aromatize, it's more like you can look at her and like you can see like the fat stores in her like in her hips and in her butt like will not, she just can't lose that weight.
Mm.
And that's a lot of that is because she's she's got too many androgens, she's aromatizing that now into estrogen.
Man, this is a lot of chemistry. I don't know how you
Yeah.
keep everything organized.
Many years of doing it, right?
Wow. It's like,
Yes.
and then you're like, sir, and then you start spewing off of this one and this one and this one. And I'm like, oh my God.
It's a lot.
You
And
know?
it's, if you're new in the sport, first of all, if you're new in the sport, like compete without using anything. Like my first show, like I didn't use anything my first show. And I'm happy that I did. And the coach that I had at the time, he's like, you need to see like if you like it, because again, like, I was talking about the 20-year-old whose boyfriend has her use an aggressive cycle. She ends up with an enlarged clitoris. And then that same boyfriend, he breaks up with her for some bikini girl, right? And now she's alone. But this is what I see. And this is why I started talking about anabolics like openly, is because that same 20-year-old girl who's now viralized, now has the enlarged clitoris, maybe her voice has changed, whatever's happened to her body. Well, now she's depressed and now she's lonely and now she doesn't want to date or get naked in front of anyone because she doesn't feel comfortable with what's happened to her body.
How often does that
And
happen?
I see it a lot.
Really?
I see it far too much.
Now you talk about
And that's what,
20-year-olds though, but it's got to
yeah,
be, but older than that too, right?
yeah, all ages. But I think for me, when I see the younger girls going through that and then they get depressed and then they ruin relationships, they ruin opportunities for themselves and their whole life starts to go down this like downward spiral. And it's all because they are mad at themselves for the choices that they made that led them to where they are. And they aren't happy with the changes that have happened in their bodies. And that's why I encourage women, before you start the anabolics, know what you're okay with. Know what you're okay with changing and what you're okay with. Know what is important to you in your femininity. What is important to you. Have that figured out and make sure you tell that to someone who has your best interest in mind and who's going to slap the shit out of you if you start compromising those things.
And why are you so passionate about helping women maintain their femininity? Like, I think it's amazing, but what drives you so hard? I mean, you're going live and you're sharing, I mean, you're putting yourself out there and sharing things that no one's talking about. Like it's taboo, it's swept under the rug and you're out there on blast. I think it's amazing.
It's
why?
important to me because once I started talking about it openly, all of these women like flooded my DMs and they were telling me their stories of, how they were going through, exactly what I was talking about and how they were depressed and how they ruined themselves with this and ruined themselves with that. And I want to stop that. And here's the thing, the idea of like, I'm not necessarily trying to like save women's femininity. I'm trying to educate women so that they can make the right choices for the level of femininity that they want to keep in themselves. Because not everyone's idea of femininity is the same. My idea of what makes me feminine is not the same idea of what you think makes you feminine. And that's okay. I'm 100% okay with that. If you're a female bodybuilder who gives zero shits about your femininity, go ahead with your bad self, sister. Do whatever the heck you want. But what I want to do is give women who do want to preserve a certain level of traditional femininity, give them the tools to make the right choices for themselves. So that way, if your voice is a concern, all right, well, how do you manage all of that? If not losing your hair is a concern, how do you go about using anabolics? How do you do it safely? How can you do it in a way that's not going to compromise these things? And I think that women need to understand that if you want to be a high level, say you want to be like a high level figure or women's physique IFBB pro, I will tell you right now, it is very unlikely that you are going to experience no side effects, getting to that level. Do you have to have crazy side effects and completely ruin yourself? No, but you have to have an expectation of if you're going to be at that level, unless you are genetically a freak, you have to assume you are going to have some sides.
Do you think, in your opinion, Jamie, just real quick, do you think, because I am planning to compete again, it's been, I want to say in my 40s that I'm better than I was at 20. So I'm going back on the stage next year myself.
I love it.
I'm going to give it a go. And it's too bad because physique, which we'll touch on real quick, I love the physique. Well, I started in bodybuilding, the posing, just everything about it. I love the strength of the posing and just everything about it. And physique, when it first came out in the Dana Lynn Bailey days, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, I could probably do this. But I had my own life stuff going on. I was going through divorce. I had so much, so much going on personally. There was just no competing for me in the future
and you're
at that
smart
time.
for not competing with all that shit going on.
Oh my God. And then you come about and I'm telling you, listeners, if you haven't seen Jamie's photos of her on stage, insanity. I mean, genetically, you are a freak. Like, forget everything.
Very
You're amazing.
Blessed.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
So
I'm
you're on
blessed.
stage and I see you and I'm like, there's no freaking way. Because again, I choose, and this is just for me, and it's probably just because my journey started 20 years ago when it was different. And for me, and where everything that I was going through. And I want to try. I want to see what I can do, what I'm capable of. But do you think that, because again, 2017-ish, would you say is when it kind of really shifted to being super, super lean in the physique category? And you attribute it yourself to that too, because you came in like crazy, freaky.
Yeah, I say like 2016, 17 was about when it started to change. And yeah, like I was part of the problem. That like I was part of one of the ones that created what we're dealing with right now, where they all like these women are super shredded, super hard. And what I think about women's physique and where I would like to see the division go is back to how it was in 2015 and 16. I think that you had Juliana Malacarne as Miss Olympia, who like absolutely beautiful, full physique. She had nice separation. She had some striations, but not crazy striated glutes. And like just very beautifully balanced, but that conditioning that she had, that was a beautiful level of conditioning that she had.
She was stunning.
And it's more, and that's a level of conditioning that I think is suitable for women's physique, because when you go beyond that, then we're looking, you're essentially the conditioning of a bodybuilder.
How do you get there? So how do you go from Julianne Malacarne? I don't know if I'm saying it right. How do you go from her to, reigning champion, like super, super crazy lean?
Well, I think it's been an evolution. And I think that it's, obviously the judges are rewarding it, but we can't blame it all on the judges, because guess what? The judges can only judge what shows up that day. So if all the women in women's physique don't want women's physique to be as conditioned, guess what, girls? Stop showing up with shredded glutes. All of you.
It does still say it does say in the description to not have striated glutes. Like it still says it.
It used to. They changed it.
Did they change it? I feel like I just read it. I feel like I just saw that. So they did remove that. And did you also notice that the Arnold, they removed the whole category? The Arnold Classic in 2000.
Did you see what Sarah Villegas, the reigning Miss Olympia, did? Yeah, she got some balls.
She does. So and go ahead. So $20,000 she's putting up for the prize money, right?
For the prize money, if the Arnold will have women's physique at the Arnold, because she wants to be able to compete there. I honestly, I don't have many good things to say about Arnold right now. Someone who says fuck your freedom, well, he can suck a big fat one for me. I don't know.
Guys, meet Jamie. She one thing about Jamie is you're always going to know where you stand. So I like that.
Yeah. Well, that, and it's like, I feel like the Arnold has kind of made women's physique the black sheep of bodybuilding for many years now. When we even look at, so the first year they had women's physique at the Arnold was the only year they invited us. So the Arnold is like the second tier down from the Olympia, right? You have the Olympia, then the Arnold's right underneath it. But the reason why the Arnold is right underneath the Olympia is because you had to get invited to it, right? That's what made it a prestigious event. But after the first year that they had women's physique at the Arnold, all of a sudden, all you had to do was get top 10 at a pro show, and you could do the Arnold in women's physique. Anyone
when did that
could
change?
Do it.
When did that change?
So they started doing that in 2014 or 15. So I think, 14 was the first year they had it at the Arnold. and they invited everyone because I had tried to get an invite. I didn't get the invite. And then the year after that is when they just let anyone do it. You had to get like top 10. And at that point I was like, well, fuck that. I'm not going to do it. Like, it's not prestigious anymore. It's just like any other show.
Were there not enough people to compete? Was there just not enough competitors if they didn't do that?
See, that's what I mean. It's like, okay, well, why are all the other divisions being invited, but we're not? And then all the other divisions, they were paying for their travel. They were paying for their room. They were getting a stipend every day. Not women's physique, not men's physique. Yeah.
Huh. And even last year, which was this year, the Arnold, they didn't even have figure this year.
No.
The Arnold, which I thought was interesting.
I feel like, Arnold is trying to, like, if you even heard his commentary at the Arnold this year, he does not like the direction that bodybuilding is going in. The Arnold was also the first show that got rid of female bodybuilding back in 2000. And I think it was. So
it wasn't the Olympia, it was the Arnold.
It was the Arnold that first got rid of it. And that was in like 2011, 12-ish. So, Arnold, I think he very much like, he wants to keep bodybuilding in like the mainstream, right? And when you think mainstream, you like, if another woman who's not in the fitness industry sees a female bodybuilder who competes at like the Olympia level, they're going to be fucking scared, right? They're going to be like, whoa, what the fuck am I looking at? For normal people, that look, it's a turnoff for a lot of people. And that's why Arnold got rid of female bodybuilding back then.
Jamie, even somebody like
very
me,
much about appearances.
Well, Jamie, even myself, when I'm lean for a show, last time I competed, for example, I got people in my inbox calling me tranny. You must be on drugs. You must be on this. And even if you look at the social media posts when they're talking about there's a natural Olympia that's going on, and people, everyone's commenting like, oh, natural. Like, you can't, anybody with muscle is automatically assumed to be on drugs. Have you noticed that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think,
where is all that coming from? I don't get it.
I don't know. That's a good question. You've got to ask those keyboard warriors, man. I think a lot of people,
there's too many.
Right. But I also think, you've also got a lot of, I think you've got a lot of people that aren't honest about their use as well. And I think that also confuses like the general public and newbies. So one of the people that I despise the most in this sport, because they're such a freaking liar, is Dana Lynn Bailey. Because girl, you ain't been natty for life. I don't care who you're trying to fool, but you ain't fooling me. And to me, it's a disservice to the women that follow her, because I get those women that follow her that say, I want to look just like Dana Lynn Bailey, but I don't want to use any drugs. And it's like, I hate to break it to you, but A, Dana Lynn Bailey is not natural. And B, you're not going to look like Dana Lynn Bailey being natural. Like, you can't look like that year round.
100% positive? You're 100% positive?
Listen, like I said, those anabolics give you a certain density and a certain look to your muscles that you cannot get as a natural athlete. And then you have her making remarks like, oh, it's because I train so hard and I'm so intense when I train. Well, that makes me think even more that you're on drugs. Because a natural person is not going to be able to train their fucking ass off all the time. You're going to run
training your
yourself
ass off to you. Yeah.
I don't know. To her, well, that's what I mean. Like, to her, for her, like, you look at her training videos, that's what it means.
But when you're enhanced, can you train more often? Can you train more often when you're enhanced?
Well, yeah. The anabolics, like I said, the anabolics are going to make it so you recover from your training faster. So, anabolics don't do the work for you. What they are allowing you to do, they're allowing you to work harder and more often.
So what does that mean? Like, can you give an example? So like a Monday through Sunday, if you're on a cycle and you are able to recover a lot faster, what does your training protocol look like? It still depends on where you are in your prep, where you are, like, because towards the end of your prep, even though you're on anabolics, depending on where your cardio is at, where, like, how much food you're eating, you may or may not be recovering well. So I don't think there's one blanket, like, this is how your training protocol is going to look. But
let's say, for example, that I'm okay right now. I'm in like in a cutting phase right now, and before I was on the anabolics, when I train legs, I would be sore for 3 days after I train legs, right? So now that I'm on a cycle, that now when I train legs, the next day I'm doing the same intensity, same volume, same intensity. My diet hasn't changed, and now when I train legs, I'm not sore the next day.
Hmm.
Get
And you
it?
grow faster?
So you're recovering faster.
Mm.
So being able to recover faster means that you can train with more volume. You can train with more weight. You're gonna be able to recover from those workouts faster.
But what about when
So
you're off? Do you lose all your gains? I mean,
you don't
clearly you
lose
don't lose
all
all
of
of
them.
them, but
No,
do
you don't lose
do
all of
some?
them, but what you are going to lose is you're going to lose some of that like fullness of the muscle. You're going to lose some of that like again, that pop, that density, that hardness in the muscle. You're going to lose that, but as long as you continue to train hard and you continue to eat right, you can maintain most of the gains that you have. You're
Same
going
with
to
the
lose some
men?
of that like again, like that artificial fullness, but you'll still keep the size.
I've heard of men, and again, I just heard, so I don't know personally, that they lose gains when they go off the PED, they're the anabolics. So is
Well,
it just because they stopped eating?
I think one of the biggest mistakes men make is they think that once they come off a cycle that they need to back off of their training.
Why?
Completely like that not completely, but that they back off so much that they aren't able to even maintain what they gained.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're backing off, why are they
Right.
backing off?
Because
I
they
mean,
think that because that's some bro thing that
oh,
bros say that you
mm.
should do, I guess.
Oh my God, the regulations in this industry are just
Right.
they're bonkers. But what about just wondering a couple safety things. So who should use PEDs in your opinion?
I think that women who have been, have tapped out their natural potential, that want to make, something more out of like, I don't think that women who are doing this sport as like a bucket list thing should be using anabolics. I say, figure out if you even like the sport, if you want to keep on doing it before you get into it. So like women who like myself, who like I'm a coach, like this is gonna amplify my career, right? Women who are okay with, possibly not having any more children. I think fertility is something that you need to think about too. If you're a woman who really, really wants, you want to have kids, I would have your kids and then compete and do whatever you want to do.
Well, why does it do
Because
that? Can you back up real quick about the fertility part? So we'll get into. I was going to ask you about post cycle therapy, but and I don't know if this is related to that. But if you're saying fertility, they should wait until they have their kids until they actually start any anabolics and whatnot. Why? What happens to make them lose their fertility?
So doing like one cycle of like Anavar is not going to probably is not going to mess with your fertility, right? But what we see is when women use anabolics for long periods of time, they don't cycle off, or they don't cycle off often enough or long enough. They don't PCT correctly. You are going to change your hormonal profile. And there are a number of different ways that that can manifest. And what you need to understand is that your fertility is linked to your hormonal profile. So if you are messing with that, you are thus messing with your fertility. So, is there one specific thing that I see happen? No, it's all different types of things that I see happen. And it depends on, is it a problem that's caused by them using it for too long, or did they use too much? Or did they already have PCOS and then they started? So, there's a bunch of different reasons why, but the bottom line is your fertility is your hormones basically. And how those work with with all your reproductive organs. And if you're messing with that, you can be messing with your fertility, and whether or not especially when we start talking more about the anti-estrogens, like, the aromatase inhibitors, that's where I really see women who have problems regulating menstruation after, because you're messing with the levels of estrogen in your body. So that can be detrimental to women's fertility.
So besides fertility, things that maybe five things. So you mentioned, for example, fertility issue. If you don't want to have your children first,
Yeah.
tap out your genetic potential. You were going to say a couple more things, but then we kind of deep dove into fertility for a second.
So making sure that like your hormones are in a good place, getting blood work, making sure that your liver, kidney, heart, that your health, you're in tip top shape. I also I know with my clients, I generally if you're using birth control, I would say ditch your birth control first. See if that's why you're not getting the gains that you want. Because birth control it's designed to make you estrogen dominant in most cases, and it is going to downregulate your natural testosterone production. So instead of using anabolics, why don't you get off your birth control? See if you can get your natural testosterone production up instead of just adding more drugs to the mix. So, that's what I usually recommend first. So if you're, so these things, if you're on birth control, maybe, all right, well, let me try that first and see if I'm going to get the results that I want. And so hormonal health, their, overall internal health is good. And that mental health, that you mentally are okay with the possibility that you might get these side effects and they might affect you for life. Because you don't know. It's kind of like playing Russian roulette. When you're doing anabolics as a woman, you may or may not get voice changes. You may or may not get clitoral enlargement. And then after you come off cycle, you may or may not be left with your voice change permanently. You may or may not have the clitoral enlargement go down. So you're playing with fire. So you've got to ahead of time know if you're okay with that. And, also taking into consideration, are you going to be okay with, if you're someone who answers the phone at your job, if people start calling you sir, are you going to be able to handle that mentally? Now, what about if you're at the grocery store and someone hears you talk, or maybe they just think you look more like a dude now and they say, hey, they whisper just loud enough, is that a man or a woman?
Oh my God. They say it loud enough for you to hear. People do.
Oh
yeah.
These are things that have happened to me clearly.
Oh my God, Jamie.
But also being able, to me, it's more of a reflection of that person. But I'm a strong person.
I was going to say, how are you so strong? How are you so strong? How are you not falling? Everyone is as strong as they decide to be, right? Yeah.
You're as strong as you decide to be. And I know for myself that these are things that I encounter. Luckily, I'm completely secure with who I am and the choices that I've made. But I've seen things like this destroy other women, where they have maybe an ex-boyfriend makes a comment on, oh, well, on one of their posts, oh, your voice has changed and you're clearly on bold, people talking down about your side effects. You've got to be okay with that. What about when your mother asks you why your voice has changed? Are you going to be okay?
How do your parents feel about you competing and everything that we're talking about today?
So when I first started competing, they were not very supportive at all. And my father, would say, don't get too muscular. Don't start looking like a man. Don't gain too much muscle.
I got that all the time.
Right. And then my mother, she was very supportive of me competing, but I do remember this one time we were in the kitchen at her place one day and she goes, Jamie Nicole, whatever you're doing, I just want you to let you know that your voice is changing. And I'm like, okay, thank you, Mom. Thanks for letting me know. So it's
but did you know already? Did you know that, or was it the first?
I did. I knew. I knew. So it's are you going to be okay explaining to, what if you have kids? What about when your kids ask you, Mommy, what's wrong with your voice? Why is your voice changing? Are you going to be able to answer that? Are you okay with answering that? Are you okay with having to deal with that? I think a lot of women forget about these things.
I also think a
And
lot of
for
women may not know because, again, even going back to the topic of Anavar, people, toss the topic around like it's no big deal. Like there's going to be, oh no, very, very minimal, or just anything like that. You're talking about estrogen blockers and not knowing what's going to happen when you remove that from your system. Will you be able to be fertile? I don't know if people know that. I don't. I mean, education, I agree with you that people need to be educated, but I think it's also the terms are tossed around in the industry and made to seem like they're no big deal. And that's why
I
I'm part
think
of why I'm
that
doing the show, because I want
right.
people like you to help
I
explain,
think that
educate.
women need to be they need to be their own advocates.
Definitely.
I think that if you get a plan from a coach and you don't know the compounds and what they do, and your coach isn't willing to explain those things to you when you ask, well, A, get a new coach and like be okay with doing that. Don't just oh, they're not going to explain it to me. I don't know what it is. Let me just take it. Well, guess what? You're an idiot. I'm sorry.
Mm.
But like, I feel like we need to people need to have some responsibility for themselves at some point. It's like, I'm not going to go, same thing. Like, I'm not going to go to a doctor and because trust, I do not believe in the medical profession right now at all. I'm not going to go to a doctor and then have them give me a prescription and not look into what it is. Like everyone's got Google these days, right?
Mm.
Like you can look up and you can research anything on your own. You've got to be your own advocate. And it's just like, don't make the bullshit excuse for yourself. Oh, well, I didn't know what it was. Well, guess what, sweetheart? You are your own person. Ask. And if your coach won't ask, get a new fucking coach. Like, and if you don't get a new coach, then guess what? That's on you. It's on you. It's your responsibility.
I genuinely hope your voice today, it speaks loud and clear. And I want this message to get out there as much as possible, because whatever your choices are, that's for you to decide. But I agree with you that people need, knowledge is power, but maybe sometimes people need to hear this reality and the things that you shared today and the honesty that you did. I can't thank you enough for everything, but people need to maybe have this as a slap across the head and go, come on, wake up. Like something's not right. Use your intuition. I did a whole episode on that as well, about if something doesn't seem right, it's probably not.
It's not. Your gut knows too. I'll tell you a good story about intuition. So I was getting ready. I was like a couple days before the 2017 Olympia. And 2017, I was already pre-qualified. I gotten fifth the year before. I was looking to place in the top 3. And I was looking amazing, like the best I've ever looked in my entire life. And so my coach was Matt Jansen. And dumbass gets his wife knocked up 9 months before the Olympia. And so he has to leave because she goes into labor the week of the Olympia. So he never gets a chance to see me, right? So I end up sending him pictures the night before the Olympia, and he tells me what to eat, and then he tells me to take a diuretic and like a prescription diuretic and like a Diazide. And I was like, I know Diazide, like my intuition, like I could feel it in my gut was like, don't take it, don't do it. But I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to listen to my coach. I'm going to do what my coach tells me to do. I ended up taking the diuretic. And you know what? I woke up at 3:00 in the morning, looked at my legs, and I knew it was over. There was no saving my look. I was flat. I totally missed. In the 1 hour that it mattered how I looked was the 1 hour I looked my worst the entire fucking prep.
And I just want to say like, that has
to really suck. That was a huge lesson of intuition. Yeah,
but
that was a huge lesson on intuition.
Well, that's massive on intuition. But man, Jamie,
like, my
to
gut
spend
knew, man.
all those months preparing.
Oh yeah,
all those months preparing to blow it. Like that sucks so bad, man. But the diuretics. What do you even need them? Did you need it?
I was so lean, I didn't need them. And it's funny because right after that show, I went to go meet up with John Meadows because he was doing my training at the time. And we were like doing a photo shoot for Grant. I was one of his athletes. So I met up with him right after the show, and he was pissed. He goes, "What the fuck did Matt give you?" And he knew right away that he had given me a diuretic. Because he's like, you looked amazing. He's like, you were too lean. When you have someone who's in really good shape, you don't need to take a diuretic. There's no fat for the water to be retained in. So it's like it can really ruin your look at that point. So
I had a posing client, Jamie. I had a posing client. She was doing her first competition. Okay, very first competition. And I prepare people the stage component for all federations, all divisions, men and women. That's my niche. So she was preparing for her first show, and she was kind of one of those very lean, naturally lean people, very long limbed, just naturally shredded. And her coach gives her a diuretic, and I get the stage photos because I didn't go to the show, and I had just seen her like midweek, and she looked amazing because everything was virtual. She looked amazing, and I'm looking at her. I'm like, what happened? Like she physically couldn't lift her arms out.
Yeah.
She was figure. She couldn't move her arms. She was like stuck in straight up like stiff as a rod. She couldn't move. And I'm like, why did you even need the diuretic in the first place? You were already lean. So I've always wondered why people just hand out diuretics like candy.
I think for the most part, they're trying to make up for the conditioning that their client doesn't have.
But this girl was shredded, and it was an amateur stage.
Yeah. I know.
I don't get it. And then aren't there stories?
I don't either.
A lot of what's going on right now, there's a lot of physical issues because of the diuretics, not necessarily anabolics. Yes. People are just saying steroids. But I'm hearing stories about multiple diuretics used at the same time. And again, all of this sounds like chemistry to me. And I can't even imagine organizing all of this stuff. And then now you're adding in multiple compounds for diuretics too. Like, is that normal?
I mean, I don't think that it's normal, but it's commonly seen now. Like, unfortunately, it's commonly seen. I don't think it should be normalized. I don't think that I don't use diuretics with my clients at all. We use maybe like an over-the-counter diuretic, something like the MHP Expel, something like that. But other than that, I'm not using any diuretics with my clients. So, again, when you're hiring a coach, ask them, what are your peak week protocols look like? What do you use with your clients? Do you use diuretics? What kind of diuretics? Ask those questions. And if they're not willing to answer those questions, then you've got to ask yourself, do you really want to be with a coach like that?
You're saying you don't even need them. That's what you're saying today.
You don't. Like, if you are in the shape that you're supposed to be for a show, you don't need diuretics.
What about post-show? I mean, you have a freebie that you're offering for people about post-cycle therapy. Can you share what that is? Well, the freebie, of course, but also what exactly post-cycle therapy is? Because we talked a lot about getting to the show and the compounds. And man, I can only imagine I know for personally what it's like to come to dial out of a show emotionally, physically, just everything. I can't imagine now you've got, I don't even know how many compounds some people are on at once. What's post-cycle therapy and what does that entail? And please share what you have to offer people.
So post-cycle therapy it's essentially what you're going to take after you do a cycle in order to get your body back to homeostasis. So we know that doing an anabolic cycle is going to mess with your kidneys, your liver, your hormone health, your heart health. So your PCT is all your supplementation that's going to help correct all of those things. So that way your body gets back to healthy and gets back to normal. And it is essential. And like, this is something that wasn't talked about, especially for women. There's PCT for men. They've been talking about that for 20 years now. But for women, this is something that we just started to talk about. Because what we see is if you're doing cycle after cycle without doing the PCT, then you have, you run the risk of like real internal organ damage, like your liver and your kidneys, also heart health, your blood lipids, but also your hormone health. So being able to correct the hormone issues that you're going to see post-cycle and making sure that you're, again, back to that homeostasis, getting your menstrual cycle again. That's what the PCT is designed for. So
how long does it last?
So anywhere between like 6 and 8 weeks. And then you would get your blood work done. You'd see, okay, did the PCT work? is everything back into range where it's supposed to be? Am I menstruating again? Is my menstruation at the right, is it a 28-day cycle? Where is my cycle right now? And so if you get that blood work back after 6 to 7 weeks or 8 weeks, if those numbers still look off, well, then that means you've got to run some of that PCT a little bit longer, depending on what is off on your blood work, right? So it's generally that 6 to 8 weeks, but depending on what that blood work looks like after that PCT, you might have to extend that a little bit longer.
Yeah, because I was going to say 6 to 8 weeks doesn't sound like that long.
No.
I mean, it doesn't sound like that long.
But you tell a woman who likes to be on anabolics that she has to be off cycle for 6 to 7 weeks, and she doesn't think that's a long time.
Why?
Because it's addicting.
Okay.
To look like Superwoman.
So, I mean, do you feel like Superwoman?
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah.
Well, you didn't say anything about that.
Well, again,
well, no wonder.
The added androgens in your system are going to make you feel more driven. You're more motivated. You're more hyper focused on what you're doing. I know for myself, when I'm on a cycle, I'm a little bit more driven. I'm a little bit more focused on what I'm doing. I get a little bit more done, opposed to when I'm not. And again, that's the androgens that are, that's part of that chemicals that's going on in your brain and how your brain is responding to that.
But what about the brain? Is there any sort of brain health that you can do in your post-psychotherapy for that emotional component that you're explaining? Because that's got to suck. I think anybody coming out of a show, seeing their body go from super crazy, freaky is amazing. It's the most incredible ride high you'll ever go on. I mean, I love everything about competing, but coming out of a show is like, ugh.
It sucks. I know. And again, so you ask, why a woman being off for 6 to 7 weeks, why she would say that's a long time. Well, okay. Same principle is, asking a competitor, do they really like to be in the off season and not be stage lean for however many months out of the year? No, they don't. Right. Because we like looking awesome, because we like looking freaking superhuman. And when you're on the anabolics, not only do you have that mental component, but you also have that physical of you look fucking amazing, right? Especially if you're doing the right thing.
But are you falling apart after the show? I mean, if you're going on post-psychotherapy and you're dialing out of a show, regardless, you're going to gain some body fat. But if you're doing it in a slow, progressive way out of a show, hopefully you're not going to, completely blow up like a stuffed tick. But maybe you do, because you're coming off certain compounds that are affecting estrogen. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. But
if you do it the right way, it should be, smooth and easy, kind of like what you would expect with a natural athlete, where you slowly reverse out of it. Again, there's a couple different components that are different from a natural athlete coming off of a show and an enhanced. And the natural athlete, you're going to lose some of your, you lose your leanness, really. And that's about it. You're losing your leanness, right?
Yeah.
Well, with someone who's doing anabolics, you're losing the leanness, but you're also losing the hardness. You're losing a little bit of strength because the anabolics are going to give you strength. So you're losing the hardness, the strength, that density of the muscle tissue. You're going to lose that. And then again, the mental component, you're going to lose a little bit more of that, that drive that you get from it. So those are going to be the differences between a natural athlete and someone who's not natural, who's coming off. Now,
so how do you help women with that? Because that's got to be a lot for them.
Well, what you're seeing, when you see women who do a show and then they blow up after, usually what has happened when that happens is they probably were using something like Nolvadex, during their prep.
Which is the estrogen, anti-estrogen.
The estrogen blocker.
Okay.
So it's the SERM. So the Nolvadex, again, that's being bound to all those estrogen receptors, right? But you still have all this estrogen that's floating around in your body. So if you all of a sudden pull that Nolvadex and you stop taking it cold turkey, guess what's going to happen? Now you don't have the Nolvadex that's bound to all those receptors. All that estrogen that's floating around, now it can bind to all those receptors, right? And
Yeah.
now that's when you see women get, because what happens when you get your period and your estrogen is high? You get fucking bloated, right?
Bloated. Yeah.
You look like,
Bloated.
right? So I know for myself, I gained like freaking 10 pounds when I get my period, right? It's ridiculous. But, so again, same thing. And then, so what happens to compound that is they stop taking the Nolvadex cold turkey, right? And then they eat like an asshole after the show. And then they don't do their cardio or they're not working out. And then that's like this perfect storm for like blowing up right after a show. I've seen it so many times with women.
I've seen it
So if
with
you're going
people
to
that
use
aren't on
something,
anything, and people that aren't on anything, and they
yeah,
just blow up because you said eating like an asshole, which we'll talk about in a second.
right.
But I mean, I've seen people backstage with suitcases, no joke, with the the rolling ones where they're rolling around, and then in the suitcase they've got like I don't even know, the whole thing is packed with junk food, tons of junk food,
Yeah.
and they're all excited about eating the junk food. Oh, and drinking. And got to have the
Yeah.
wine and everything else above it. So that's just people that are just coming off of a show without the PEDs. So what you're saying is now you're adding in pulling out something like Nolvadex, and it's like that sounds like a recipe for disaster. This is scary, Jamie.
Yeah, it is. It's so the PCT becomes an important part of like keeping your hormone and your body healthy as you're using anabolics, because you can use these compounds and not completely destroy yourself, but you have to be smart. You have to be doing your PCT. And what I'm doing right now is I'm doing a series, like a video series on PCT, where I'm going to cover, I'm breaking it up into sections where I'm covering liver health. Then I'm going to do like liver and kidney health. And we're going to talk about hormone health, how to correct all of those things. And I'm going to be sharing that on my Instagram and on my YouTube. And then once those videos get released, there's going to be free PDF downloads that'll have clickable links for all the products that I use in my, like all of my clients, PCT.
I
So
think you have
that'll
a
like,
freebie now too, right? You have something out there right now for people.
so right now, I think the only download I have is the like amino asylum protocols. So I know that you can go on my link tree and there's like a download for that. And that's really, so the amino asylum protocols, that's all like the peptides, and like the injectable fat burners, things like that, and how I use them. So if you're a woman who, maybe you want a little bit of an edge, but you don't want to mess with your hormones, like you don't want to mess with the anabolics, you don't want to worry about virilization, but maybe you want to like put on a little bit of size, or maybe you want to like, accelerate some fat loss, going to that PDF download will give you, peptides that, like, I don't have any SARMs on there, but like, because I don't really do the SARMs things, but I've got whole peptide protocols and even like the injectable fat burners like L-carnitine and stuff like that. So if anyone wants to check that out, but all the PCT downloads, those are all going to be coming in the next. So that's all, like, I'm working on all of like creating all that video content this week. So hopefully by the end of the week, I actually just started up my YouTube channel too. So I'm going to be doing it both on Instagram and on YouTube. So that people can follow it on all different platforms, and so it's easily accessible. The YouTube's going to be nice because then there'll be playlists with different topics and stuff. So that's some exciting new stuff coming out. But when I release the video on the like each PCT topic, I'll get the link on there for the downloads as well.
And I think that's great because I think at the end of the day, people are going to be introduced to and a lot of different compounds, I think. And it's important for people to be educated to know that they need to research things, but also the idea of post-psychotherapy. I don't know if that's even something that's common practice, or is it?
I think it's becoming more common, but it's still, I still think that there needs to be more knowledge around it, especially for women. I think for men, they've got that down. But for women, it's still fairly new. Like I said, when I started bodybuilding, I didn't even know what PCT was.
How'd you even get into bodybuilding?
I got into bodybuilding. So before I started bodybuilding, I was in construction. And I would, I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I was an alcoholic. And one day I just like looked in the mirror, and I was like 25 at the time. And I was just like, I looked like I was 35. I felt like crap. And I was like, this is not the life I want to live. And I decided to quit drinking and quit smoking. And I had a lot of free time after that, because all I did was like go to the bar all the time and drink. So I was like, what am I going to do with all this free time? I was really unhappy with my body. So I was like, I'm going to go to the gym and just see what I can do. I'd always really admired female athletes, and I had never been an athlete in my life. I failed gym class.
You'd never know. You look so athletic.
Right? Like I was never an athlete, never. People would always say, oh, you're never going to be an athlete, Jamie. You're too clumsy. So I never tried. I never tried. Right?
Oh my God, people.
So then I started going to the gym. I met a girl who competed. We started training together. I went to her first show, helped her backstage. It was Team U. And this was the first year they had bikini in Team U.
Oh, okay.
And she ended up getting her pro card. And I saw the figure girls. This is before they had women's physique. I saw the figure girls, and I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And that's when I decided I was going to bodybuild. And I started in bikini. I did terrible bikini.
Stop right there. Say that again. What?
I did bikini for 2 years. I got dead last at like all my bikini shows.
Why?
Well, the first one, like I said, my first show, like I was natural. I was not nearly lean enough. I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I look at the picture, like I have a video somewhere of me on stage, and I did, my first show was the New Englands in Boston, which is like a huge show.
Yeah,
like,
right.
You don't do New Englands as your first show. Especially when you have no idea how it's.
I was going to say, did you know? Did you know it was big?
No idea. Okay. No idea. So I ended up going to New England. I bombed. I got like dead last, but I have a video somewhere of me posing, and it's like a giraffe on ice skates, right?
Oh, no.
It's awful. So, and then my other bikini shows, I ended up getting like dead last in those, and the shows with the year after, I was too lean for bikini. And so I really should have just jumped into figure, in those shows, but you live and you learn.
What year?
And then, so that was my second year competing in bikini. And then
whereabouts? Was it early 2010?
So that was somewhere. My first year competing was 2008.
So
my
figure
second
looked
year,
a lot different then.
Yes. Yeah. And so then, like, after my second year of competing in bikini, I hated the bikini division. I didn't want to be in it. I didn't even want to do bikini that year. I wanted to do figure that year, and I should have. So I decided, I'm like, you know what? Like, I should have done figure. I would have placed better. I would have done a lot better. I'm like, I'm sick of listening to what everyone, because I had a coach that was like, you have to start in bikini. You have to do well in bikini, and then you can move up to figure. And, I ditched that coach, and I was like, fuck that. I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want. And I decided that, I'm like, screw it. So that was the year that women's physique came out. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to compete again until I do that division. So I skipped figure, went right to women's physique, and I fell in love with it. And I'll tell you what, if you're a competitor and a new competitor, and you're trying to, you look at your body and you're like, oh, there's no way I can be in women's physique. I've got to stay in bikini, or I've got to stay in figure because of, the way that my body is, or I don't have enough muscle yet. Well, guess what? You can change, and you go with the division where your heart is on fire. Because when you are say with myself, I didn't like bikini. You know how much effort I put into my bikini shows? 70%, right? Because I wasn't excited about it. I hated bikini, right? But when women's physique, I was excited about it. You know how much effort I put into those preps, into getting to the women's physique stage? 110%. So you're going to work 10 times harder at something you really fucking want, opposed to working half-ass for something that, I'm not really excited about.
I couldn't agree more, because this is a sport that is a sport of longevity, or at least it can be. So again, you can do this at 20, 50, teenagers, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even 50s and 60s. I mean, this is timeless. And so what you're saying is, I mean, maybe right now, I mean, if this is the division that you want, try it, do your best, max it out. And then each year you should be getting better, unless you're the person who's cardio queen and on 800
Right.
calories, then that's never going to happen. But again, I think that if you look at it from a longevity standpoint, and I like that you said that you should not just be told what to do what you want to do. This is, for most people, it is a hobby. Okay. It is something that they may or may not ever really do more beyond. If you want to be a coach, you want to aspire to do other things. Yes, competing can help, build your portfolio. So that from that standpoint, it's not, but competing itself can be something that you can do for a really, really long time. So, I like that you said that. Compete where you want to compete and don't necessarily listen to what everyone is telling you. So you're telling me that you had all these voices in your ear that were telling you to do this, that, and the other thing. And you finally said, nope, I'm going to do physique. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, fuck, I'm just gonna do what I want to do. And it was the best decision I made.
And for me next year,
I had a lot of people telling me, I would tell people that I was going to be an Olympian and they would laugh at me. Like, okay, Jamie. Yeah, right.
Really?
And so now it's great because my Olympia picture is like huge poster size at their gym. And just really? Like looking at them the entire time they train. I'm like,
Which, by the way, your original gym is my gym, Energy Fitness. A little shout out to Dina, Brett, and Luke, and
no,
Rob.
My home gym is the Montanari Powerhouse Gym. So that's where my ex-husband was originally.
Oh,
from.
Originally, but didn't you go to Energy
my
Fitness?
Ex-husband. I visited there maybe 1 or 2 times.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All
he
right.
worked there.
He'd work there. Got it.
Yeah, I only visited a couple times. Yeah. No, I come from the Montanari Powerhouse Gym. It's still, I still do very much love that gym. I miss it every day. But yeah, that was my old stomping ground there, and it's fun. It's always fun to go back because I feel like a little celebrity when I go back there. It's fun.
Well, you are. You're a 3-time Olympian. Hello, and I love that you are able to tell the naysayers that you made it to the Olympia 3 times, and I'm telling the naysayers, look, I'm in my 40s and I'm going to try competing again, and I'm not going to let anybody tell me I can't. I'm going to do the best I can and bring the best package that I possibly can, because this is an individual sport at the end of the day. It's about our own individual goals. And, Jamie, you bring a lot of knowledge about a topic that is swept under the rug. It is considered taboo. I think it's a lot of misinformation out there. And I think, you being a voice for this is so important. One last question I have for you.
Sure.
So you mentioned eating like an asshole, which I just love that terminology. I'm going to recycle that.
Yep.
What does eating like an asshole look like for Jamie Pinder?
For me now, or when I competed?
Both. I mean, there's
all
levels.
Right. So when I competed, when I first started competing, so there's kind of different phases in when I compete. So when I first started competing, if I was going to eat like an asshole, I actually I would eat like an entire pizza. I would eat an entire gallon of ice cream, like a whole package of I was one of those people that I could eat just for hours and just eat everything, right?
You were the girl with the suitcase I was talking about?
Yeah, exactly. But it was crazy because there were a couple of years when I competed and it was every time I would have a cheat meal like that. And granted, I was only eating like that when I was super shredded. So one thing is when you get super shredded, you can have a cheat meal that's you can just gorge for hours, and you're going to wake up the next day and you're going to look 10 times better. You're going to look freaky when you wake up, veins everywhere. You're going to be popping like crazy. So, but you have to get to a certain level of conditioning. You can't do that when you're still fat, because guess what? You're only going to get fatter. But if you're in this sweet spot at the end of prep, then you can eat like an asshole like that for one day, and you'll look better the next day. That's why a lot of people, the day after the show, they end up looking better. So same principle. So back when I first started competing, that's what it looked like. And then when I was with Matt Jansen, I didn't have a cheat meal for over a year. I was 100% clean, organic, everything. I had Lyme disease at the time, so there was some health things underlying that I did that for. And then back then, a cheat meal, me going all out, was me having sushi and maybe a cookie. And that was like me going all out.
I
And
don't know,
then
Jamie.
now,
I don't.
right? Well, that's, that's the difference. And like, you
Yeah.
also like, you can also see the difference in the way that my physique looked at those times. Though, when I would have those big, like garbage food, like binges, my body didn't look nearly as good as when I was with Matt and my cheat meals were clean sushi and maybe a cookie. So I looked a hell of a lot better. I felt a hell of a lot better, with the latter situation. And
Sounds like
then
you had a
now,
healthier relationship with food.
yeah, I mean, I'm not
No?
sure if it was healthier.
No?
I was actually I was so obsessed with everything being like organic and perfect and clean that even like having sushi, like almost like made me anxious. So it was too much.
Oh, wow.
Like I needed to like back off from that a little bit. And I'm like, I remember I went on vacation with my husband at the time. We went to Miami and I was like a freaking Nazi with my food the entire time. And it's things like that I look back on and I'm like, fuck, I should have just like let loose a little, like
Mm.
not been such a pain in the ass about my freaking food and everything else. But you live and you learn, right? Like I've
Yeah.
got to grow from that situation.
Where are you now?
So I have. So now if I'm gonna like go all out, I might have like a burger and then like a pint of Ben and Jerry's or like, something like that. Nothing too crazy. I don't like food that makes me feel like crap. So it's like more like, going out to a nice steakhouse, maybe like getting a really nice dinner and then coming back and having a good dessert after. I'm more of a sweets person.
Oh,
I could
okay.
really do without dinner at all and just go right to dessert and I'd be happy.
How often do you have an off-plan meal?
Right now, I don't. Because I'm dieting right now I'm going on vacation.
Ooh, where are you going?
So I'm going to the Dominican with my mother. We're leaving on Thanksgiving,
Oh,
and
fun.
I'm not answering the phone, no texts, no
Don't be a
updates
pain.
no
Jamie, you're not
nothing.
allowed to be a pain.
I am off the grid for 5 days.
Good.
So I'm going with my mother.
You're
It
not
was her
lugging your
60th
gallon of
birthday.
water around.
No, it was her 60th birthday this year. So this is like her birthday present of us like having
Oh,
this
that's awesome.
girls trip. So
Aw.
I'm like, I just want to be in awesome shape for, for this little vacation. I'll probably do some photo shoots when I get back.
Yeah, right
So
on.
right
You're dialed
now
in.
I'm not
That's
having
great.
any, but usually like when I'm not like dieting for something specific, I'll have, I'll eat if I want to have a free meal, I'll have one. I don't really restrict myself. But honestly, like I don't go out that much. I don't go out to eat much. I prefer to just like stay on my diet. That's just how I like to feel. I
Well,
just like feeling good.
you look amazing, so
Thank
it's worth
you.
it. Yeah, it's worth it. And one last question, 1B. I said one last, but I lied. So one more. What's your favorite body part to
Okay.
train?
I'd have to say quads. Quads are my
Quads.
favorite.
What
Yeah, I
exercise?
love quad. Ooh, probably single leg like squats or split squats or lunges. I like the single leg stuff.
Yeah, those burn.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Jamie, you are amazing. Boy, the things that you shared today, I can't thank you enough. I want everybody that's listening to go find Jamie on Instagram. And you also said you have a new YouTube channel as well. Is it you call Jamie Pinder?
Do. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
So
your
you can
Instagram
find me
profile. Yeah. Go ahead and
is
share where they can find you.
Jamie Pinder 14 is my Instagram. And yeah, on YouTube, I just started it. So there's only one video up right now. But I'll be uploading that content. I'm planning on putting out a couple of videos a week on the YouTube channel. So, starting with some like, frequently asked questions. I'm going to do a whole highlight on just like Anavar the first week. So you'll get some really good content even in the first week of me putting stuff up there.
That's excellent. I think the information that you're sharing is incredible. I don't think there's enough of it being shared. I don't think a lot of the information that is out there is speaking in layman's terms. If I was to offer that to you, because I don't think people really know, you speak so freely about these compounds, and then you go into the different types of compounds, and people don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
I know from hearsay, but I don't. You also can speak from experience too, and you in an absolute wealth of knowledge. So I highly encourage everyone to go check you out, Jamie Pinder 14, and then also on the YouTube channel. Jamie, I hope you come back on. I'm sure we talked about a lot today. Can you believe it?
Yeah, we did.
Wow.
I know when I saw your questions, I was like, ooh. I was like, we're going to go over a lot today. We've been buckle up. But this has been great.
You're a busy
I appreciate
lady.
you having me on.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you so much.
What are the things you need to know before competing in a bodybuilding competition? The Everything Else in Bodybuilding podcast is dedicated to taking out the guesswork in the industry and exposing all these strategies. Learn 5 things I think you should know before your next show by downloading your free ebook called 5 Tips Every Competitor Needs to Know Before Your Next Competition at www.einbb.com. It's all the no-nonsense information you need, whether you are male or female, bodybuilder, physique, figure, bikini, or wellness competitor. It's free, so just go download my 5 tips every competitor needs to know before your next show at EEandBB.com.